Hey guys, it's KJ from the Scariest Movie Ever channel on YouTube. There is a plan for destroying America. It exists on paper, and thousands of people are involved in executing it. Many are doing it knowingly, some are being used as pawns, and others are being bribed for their silence. It's all based on greed built on power and fueled by hatred. Watching events unfold in America around the globe since 2008, it's undeniable that this blueprint for destruction was ready to hit the ground running as soon as Obama took office. This is again part of that false left-right paradigm. We shouldn't be clinging to either party, really, because both of them are so infiltrated at this point, and they basically work off of each other. This plan is dependent upon disruptive ideologies, social science, and metrics. And there were many factors in place prior to Obama taking office. Systemic brainwashing in academia, United Nations tentacles reaching into small-town America, and more. The election of 2008 was truly a D-Day for the progressives' plan of fundamentally transforming America. With the executive branch in their control, they could begin using the highest powers in the land to change the face of America. With the Department of Justice, the State Department, the FBI, CIA, Supreme Court at their disposal, they had carte blanche to commence the attack. There was just one more thing they needed. That was tech savvy. By 2011, the president was meeting with America's wealthiest internet entrepreneurs, supposedly under the guise of a technology summit aimed at creating new jobs. Reporters were banned from this event, but a White House photo showed the group toasting the future. So a series of plans were already in place for multi-pronged attacks on American culture. Anything not in the original plan fell into the category of disruptive opportunity, as they took advantage of unanticipated events to further their agenda, even sometimes creating these events themselves. So it's not that difficult to see some of these larger goals right before our very eyes. Silencing the opposition is one of their tactics. Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, is something you should look into if you're not familiar with it, and you'll literally see the blueprint of the way that America is being run right now, and how they're turning us all against each other. The promotion of abortion is also another one of those tactics. A focus on disarming the American people, we all know that that's a big part of it. The destruction of traditional marriage, weakening our military, the promotion of Islam, attempting to destroy the cultural history of America, and flooding the country with illegal immigrants. We see that's happening right now as well. Rapists, murderers, drug dealers, and disease. It's not to say that every immigrant is one of these things, but it just seems that we're getting an influx of a lot of this right now. Not just in America, but all around the world. They're also instigating a race war, racially motivated riots in Ferguson, Baltimore, and other protests all around the country. And how many of these are organic? That's really the question. How many of these are controlled? That's what I want to know. George Bush and his administration used time-tested tactics to close down an open society and to set the groundwork for Obama to come in and continue the demolition. Truly, we need only look to the lessons of the Europeans and other kinds of fascism we've seen around the world to understand the potential seriousness of all of these events that are unfolding right now in the U.S. And again, there are these time-tested tactics that people have been using for centuries to destroy empires, to destroy countries. One of those is to invoke a terrifying internal and external enemy. After we were hit on September 11th, 2001, we were in a state of national shock. Less than 6 weeks later, on October 26th, 2001, the USA Patriot Act was passed by Congress and had little chance to debate it. Many said that they scarcely had time to even read it. It happened so fast. We were told we were now on a war footing, and we were in a global war, a global caliphate against a global caliphate that was intending to wipe out our whole civilization. There have been other times of crisis in which the U.S. accepted limits on civil liberties, such as during the Civil War, when Lincoln declared martial law, and the Second World War, when thousands of Japanese American citizens were placed in so-called concentration camps. Creating a terrifying threat, a Hydra-like secret evil, is an old trick. It can, just like Hitler's invocation of a communist threat to the nation's security, it can be based on actual events. And oftentimes, they're not based on actual events. This is where we look into the false flag attacks. You can look at the Reichstag fire of February 1933, and it was swiftly followed in Nazi Germany by passage of something they called the Enabling Act, which replaced constitutional law with an open-ended state of emergency. And we've seen that something similar play out here in America, of course, right? Something else they do is create a gulag. Once you have got everybody scared, the next step is to create some form of a prison system outside of the rule of law. As Bush put it, he wanted the American detention center in Guantanamo Bay to be situated in a legal, quote, outer space. So that way torture could take place and there be no public eyes on it. At first, the people who are sent there are seen by citizens as outsiders, troublemakers, spies, enemies of the state, criminals, things like that. And initially, the citizens tend to support this secretive prison system. At least we've seen this throughout history. It makes them feel safer, and they don't identify with the prisoners. But soon enough, civil society leaders, opposition members, labor activists, clergy and journalists, everybody else, they're all going to get arrested as well and sent to the prisons too. And this process throughout history took place in fascist shifts or anti-democracy crackdowns ranging from Italy to Germany in the 1920s and the 1930s. Another one of these tactics that they'll use is to harass citizens groups. Any group that gets together to form any kind of an opposition against anything that big government stands for seems to be a target. The American Civil Liberties Union, which I don't trust anyway, but still, they put out a report a while back that thousands of ordinary American anti-war, environmental, and other groups have been infiltrated by agents. A secret Pentagon database includes more than 4 dozen peaceful anti-war meetings, rallies, or marches by American citizens, and it's all under the category of something that the Pentagon calls, quote, suspicious incidents. And the equally secretive counterintelligence field activity, CIFA agency, they're under the Department of Defense, has been gathering information about domestic organizations engaged in peaceful political activities. The CIFA is supposed to track potential terrorist threats. That's what they're there for, as it watches ordinary U.S. citizen activists. A little-noticed new law had redefined activism not long ago, such as animal rights protesters, calling them terrorists. So we see this definition of terrorism is slowly expanding to include any group that opposes big government. Another tactic we've seen a lot of these fascists use throughout history is to arbitrarily take people into captivity and then release them. In 2004, America's Transportation Security Administration confirmed that it had a list of passengers who were targeted for security searches or worse if they tried to fly. Controlling the press, targeting individuals, and suspending the rule of law are just a few more of those tactics. Not long ago, I was watching a video from Press Reset Earth, and he had referenced something in this video called the 11 Symptoms of Final Decay of Civilization. It fits in perfectly with what I'm trying to show you here. So I found the article. I'll leave a link below. In 1947, sociologist Dr. Carl Zimmerman wrote a text called Family and Civilization. I'm going to leave a link below for you to check this out for yourself. But he identified 11 symptoms of final decay that were observable in the fall of both the Greek and Roman civilizations. It's really interesting to read these and just to see how many of these actually characterize our modern society, not just in America, but what seems to be happening all around the world. Number 1 there was a no-fault divorce, so that should come as no surprise. The institution of marriage, really generally the whole idea of people bonding together and falling in love, that whole idea has been under attack by the elites for a very, very long time. Number 2, of course, is the increased disrespect for parenthood and parents. We're seeing plenty of that as well, right? I mean, examples all around you. Number 3 was the meaningless marriage rites and ceremonies. So meaningless marriage rites and ceremonies. So we can see just, for example, here in America, how the traditional view of marriage has been completely trampled on, right? I mean, basically we're at a point right now where anything goes. Number 4 was a defamation of past national heroes. I thought that was really interesting. I've actually covered that on a few of my chat shows in the past, how it seems like they're destroying all of our heroes, right? All of our older heroes. So look at what happened to Bruce Jenner. It's a great example, right? Look at Bill Cosby. There was even the guy that played the preacher in Seventh Heaven. I can't remember his name, but they busted him and it turned out he's a pedophile, right? So these are just a few examples, just a handful, where this seems to be what they do. They destroy all of our heroes, right? Our national heroes. And I'm just talking about celebrities right here for the most part. Number 5 is an acceptance of alternative marriage forms. So that all kind of falls in line with a few of the other ones. Number 6, widespread attitudes of feminism, narcissism, and hedonism. I don't even know where to begin with that. I think that all speaks for itself. It's pretty obvious where we're at right now. Propagation of anti-family sentiment is number 7. Number 8 is the acceptance of most forms of adultery. Again, anything goes. There's a website out there right now called ashleymadison.com. It's all about cheating. It's actually meant for people that are married or in relationships that just want to cheat on the person they're supposed to be in love with. I think it's sick. I think it's sad, but it's right there in your face, and that's just one more example of where we're at, where the acceptance of most forms of adultery. Basically anything goes, right? Number 9 is rebellious children. We see that, of course. Number 10 is increased juvenile delinquency. I mean, both those things. What about the knockout game? Remember the knockout game, for just one example of youths running around and just knocking people out at random? I mean, that's just one example, but we see this increased rebelliousness all around. It's a spirit, really, and it's encompassing the planet, I feel. The number 11, of course, the very last one, is a common acceptance of all forms of sexual perversion. So now this brings us to 2016, and how are all of these tactics that have been used by the elites, the hidden controllers for all these years, how are they being used here in America now, right, more specifically? I've covered this in the past. A lot of other people have covered this as well. Agenda 21, if you're not familiar with that subject, please look into Agenda 21, because it's literally happening right now in America before our very eyes. Now recently the Pope came to America. He was talking about the United Nations 2030 Agenda. The 2030 Agenda is basically Agenda 21 just repackaged, put in a prettier package. But it's still the same thing. In fact, I'd say that this is even worse. They're literally putting it right out there in front of our face. They're telling people what they're going to do. It's fascinating because the way they can put it out there and the way they spin it, so few people actually understand the implications or the wickedness behind this design. Now this article was found on Natural News. It was actually originally written by Michael Snyder of endoftheamericandream.com. So again, I'll leave a link below to both of those sources. The document itself described nothing less than a global government takeover of every nation across the planet. This is Agenda 2030. The goals of the document are nothing more than the code words for a corporate government fascist agenda that will imprison humanity in a devastating cycle of poverty while enriching the world's most powerful globalist corporations like Monsanto and DuPont. Now here's a point-by-point translation of the document, and notice how nowhere in the document does it ever state anything about achieving human freedom as one of its goals, because they want the exact opposite of that. And nor does it ever explain how these goals are actually going to be achieved of theirs. So as you'll see here, every single point in this UN agenda is to be achieved through centralized government control and totalitarian mandates that resemble communism. So the first goal is end poverty in all its forms everywhere. That's the goal. The translation is put everyone on government welfare, food stamps, housing subsidies, and handouts that make them obedient slaves to global government. Never allow people upward mobility to help themselves. Instead, teach mass victimization and obedience to a government that provides monthly allowance money for basic essentials like food and medicine. We'll label it ending poverty. Goal number 2 is end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. It sounds so nice, doesn't it? But the translation is invade the entire planet with GMOs and Monsanto's patented seeds while increasing the use of deadly herbicides under the false claim of increased output of food crops. Engineer genetically modified plants to boost specific vitamin chemicals while having no idea of the long-term consequences of genetic pollution or cross-species genetic experiments carried out openly in a fragile ecosystem. Number 3 is ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Translation is mandate 100% vaccines for all children and adults at gunpoint, threatening parents with arrest and imprisonment if they refuse to cooperate. I don't mean to laugh at that, guys. This is real stuff here, but they'll push heavy medication use on children as well. We see that. Goal number 4 is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Translation: push a false history and a dumbed-down education under Common Core education standards that produce obedient workers rather than independent thinkers. Never let people learn real history, or else they might realize they don't want to repeat it. Goal number 5 is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Translation: criminalize Christianity, marginalize heterosexuality, demonize males, and promote the LGBT agenda everywhere. The real goal is never equality, but rather the marginalization and shaming of anyone who expresses any male characteristics whatsoever. The ultimate goal is to feminize society, creating widespread acceptance of gentle obedience, along with the self-weakening ideas of communal property and sharing everything, because only male energy has the strength to rise up against oppression and fight for human rights. The suppression of male energy is key to keeping the population in a state of eternal acquiescence. Goal number 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Translation: allow powerful corporations to seize control of the world's water supplies and charge monopoly prices to, quote, build new water delivery infrastructure that, quote, ensures availability. Goal number 7 is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Translation: penalize coal, gas, and oil while pushing doomed-to-fail green energy subsidies to brain-dead startups headed by friends of the White House who all go bankrupt in 5 years or less. The green startups make for impressive speeches and media coverage, but because these companies are led by corrupt idiots rather than capable entrepreneurs, they always go broke. Goal number 8 is to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Translation: regulate small business out of existence with government-mandated minimum wages that bankrupt entire sectors of the economy. Force employers to meet hiring quotas of LGBT workers while mandating wage tiers under a centrally planned work economy dictated by the government. Destroy free market economies and deny permits and licenses to those companies that do not obey the government dictates. Goal number 9 is to build resilient infrastructure and promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization and foster innovation. Translation: put the nations into extreme debt with the World Bank, spending debt money to hire corrupt American corporations to build large-scale infrastructure projects that trap developing nations in an endless spiral of debt. You can see the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins to understand the details of how this scheme has actually been repeated countless times over the past several decades. Goal number 10 is to reduce inequality within and among countries. Translation: punish the rich, the entrepreneurs, and the innovators, confiscating nearly all gains by those who choose to work and excel. Redistribute the confiscated wealth to the masses of non-working human parasites that feed off of a productive economy while contributing nothing to it, all while screaming about equality. Goal number 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Translation: ban all gun ownership by private citizens, concentrating guns into the hands of obedient government enforcers who rule over an unarmed, enslaved class of impoverished workers. Criminalize living in the most rural areas by instituting Hunger Games-style protected areas, which the government will claim are owned by the, quote, people. We already have that, guys. They're called FEMA regions. You can look that up. Even though no people are allowed to live there, force all humans into densely packed, tightly controlled cities where they are under 24/7 surveillance and subject to easy manipulation by the government. Goal number 12 is to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Translation: begin levying punitive taxes on the consumption of fossil fuels and electricity, forcing people to live under conditions of worsening standards of living that increasingly resemble third world conditions. Use social influence campaigns in TV, movies, and social media to shame people who use gasoline, water, or electricity, establishing a social construct of ninnies and tattlers who run out their neighbors in exchange for food credit rewards. Goal number 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Translation: set energy consumption quotas on each human being and start punishing or even criminalizing lifestyle decisions that exceed energy usage limits set by governments. Institute total surveillance of individuals in order to track and calculate their energy consumption. Penalize private vehicle ownership and force the masses onto public transit, where TSA grunts and facial recognition cameras can monitor and record the movement of every person in society. It's like a scene ripped right out of the movie Minority Report. Goal number 14 is to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Goal number 15 is to protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. It's a mouthful. The translation is roll out Agenda 21 and force humans off the land and into controlled cities. Criminalize private land ownership, including ranches and agricultural tracts. Tightly control all agriculture through a corporately controlled government bureaucracy whose policies are determined almost entirely by Monsanto while being rubber stamped by the USDA. Ban wood stoves, rainwater collection, and home gardening in order to criminalize self-reliance and force total dependence on government. Goal number 16 is to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Translation: grant legal immunity to illegal aliens and protected minority groups, which will be free to engage in any illegal activities they choose, including openly calling for the mass murder of police officers, because they are the new protected class in society, you see. Inclusive institutions, that means granting favorable tax structures and government grants to corporations that hire LGBT workers or whatever groups are currently in favor with the central planners in government. Using the IRS and other federal agencies to selectively punish unfavorable groups with punitive audits and regulatory harassment, all while ignoring the criminal activities of favored corporations that are friends of the political elite. Goal number 17 is to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Translation: enact global trade mandates that override national laws while granting unrestricted imperialism powers to companies like Monsanto, Dow Chemical, R.J. Reynolds, Coca-Cola, and Merck. Pass global trade pacts that bypass a nation's lawmakers and override intellectual property laws to make sure the world's most powerful corporations maintain total monopolies over drugs, seeds, chemicals, and technology. Basically, they'll nullify all national laws and demand total global obedience to trade agreements authored by powerful corporations and rubber-stamped by the UN. If you read the full document and can read beyond the fluffery and public relations phrases, you'll quickly realize that this UN agenda is going to be forced upon all the citizens of the world through the invocation of government coercion. Nowhere does this document state that the rights of the individual will be protected, because they won't. Nor does it even acknowledge the existence of human rights granted to individuals by our Creator. Even the so-called Universal Declaration of Human Rights utterly denies individuals the right to self-defense, the right to medical choice, and the right to parental control over their own children. The UN is planning nothing less than a global government tyranny that enslaves all of humanity while calling the scheme sustainable development and equality. You see, these people really aren't that sneaky. As we've seen right here, they keep using the same tactics over and over again. But right now, it's on our doorstep. It's not just here in America. As we've just read, it's all around the world. Now we're seeing these tactics come into play on a global scale with Agenda 2030. And once again, Agenda 2030 is just another label for the same old stunts these people have been trying to pull behind the scenes for centuries. They're really not that clever. Some of us see what they're doing. Not all of us. The majority, I believe, is still lost. But we're growing. We may be a smaller number compared to the mass majority of the planet, but our numbers are growing. People are waking up. We're beginning to see through this stuff. And we have to fight it in our own individual ways. So thanks for checking out the video. Take care out there, stay aware, and I'll talk to you real soon.